Cornell, Columbia, NYU. In the last month, college campuses have been a flashpoint. Protests and escalating tensions, all stemming from the Hamas terror attack on Israel. These incidents have sometimes turned violent, with students fearing for their safety. The subject was front and center during a hearing about free speech in Congress this week. Lawmakers on the House Judiciary Committee examined the current state of the First Amendment and several free speech violations on campuses. The conversation was dominated by recent events related to the conflict in the Middle East. But before proceedings could get underway, pro-Palestinian protesters interrupted the hearing, a visual indication of the charged opinions around this issue.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of the committee.
Committee will be in order. Committee will be in order.
Opposition to genocide. Over 10,000 people have been killed, and you're trying to silence the free speech of students.
We appreciate people being here, but the committee has to be in order. If you, we will remove every single person who disrupts the committee.
And the hearing continued after 5 minutes of those protests. The panel included 6 witnesses, 3 who specialize in anti-Semitism work, a Jewish student at Cornell University, and 2 students who were leaders for conservative organizations at their colleges. All students said at some point during their educational training, they did not feel safe on their campus because of their beliefs. We heard testimony from 2 conservative students who say tensions over free speech on college and university campuses have been simmering for years. They tell lawmakers that left-leaning students successfully shut down their conservative events, preventing conservative speakers from sharing their values on campus.
However, the most striking action taken against us followed Lieutenant Colonel West's speech, which had included a discussion of race in America and accounts from his decorated past. When the floor was opened to a question and answer session, student protesters shouted from their seats before the audiovisual employees from UB Student Association, the student government, cut powers to the event's microphones and speakers, ending the session. Confrontations continued upon the exit from the event, and once outside, as you just saw in the video before the opening statements, chapter members were chased by a 100-person mob across campus.
But when a leftist doesn't want to hear a speaker, they do everything they can to shut the lecture down. Our club recently hosted Matt Walsh. Students and faculty were willing to do anything to cancel the event just because they found Walsh's speech to be offensive. Some people were so dedicated to silencing our voices that literally as one of us was advertising with chalk, a leftist student was erasing each of those letters with a wipe. We received death threats along with plenty of verbal harassment. That night, before the speaking event, my hallmate, who happened to be the one erasing the chalk, stalked outside of my bedroom door by putting his ear on it to see if I was in my room because he was just so outraged by my involvement.
Testimony also focused on the rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses since the Israel-Hamas war began last month. A Jewish student at Cornell said she's in constant fear while on campus because last week, a fellow student, 21-year-old Patrick Dye, was arrested after posting anti-Semitic threats online calling for the killing and injuring of his fellow Jewish classmates.
Imagine that you frequent Jewish events on campus. Imagine that you live in a Jewish sorority house. Then imagine scrolling on your phone one day only to discover that a fellow student wants to shoot up the kosher dining hall and I quote, gang rape all Jew pig women on campus. That is what my peers and I experienced last week when reading the multiple online threats made by a fellow student instructing other Cornell students to assault Jews on campus, to follow them home and slit their throats. This was not just hate speech. It was a call to action and an immediate threat.
As House Republicans and Democrats listened to witness testimony, they seemingly agreed with each other that anti-Semitism and students not feeling safe on their school property because of their beliefs is a serious problem. However, lawmakers could not seem to agree on a solution. Democrats say Congress should provide more funding for the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, which handles discrimination complaints at higher ed institutions.
There is a clear policy solution to combating the rise of anti-Semitism and other abhorrent discrimination on college campuses, and that is to fully fund the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. Budgets, when you are in government, budgets are a statement of your values. How we spend money demonstrates what we really care about. And we should care about the rise in hateful speech and dehumanizing language in America generally, and specifically, as is the topic of this hearing, on college and university campuses.
However, Republicans believe more federal dollars won't fix the issue. They propose to decrease the office's budget by $35 million in the 2024 Labor, Health, and Human Services spending bill.
By the time it gets to the Office of Civil Rights, we have failed them. So, Mr. Marcus, why would we put more federal dollars into something like this? I think this is part of what you're hearing from some of us up here, is we are saying, is there really a federal role? Should we be pumping more federal dollars in?
On Tuesday, the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights wrote in a Dear Colleague letter that colleges and universities that receive federal financial assistance have an obligation to address prohibited discrimination against students, including those who are or are perceived to be Jewish, Israeli, Muslim, Arab, or Palestinian. The discussion is far from over. Next week, the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development will hold a hearing titled Confronting the Scourge of Anti-Semitism on Campus.